For nearly 50 years, horse-drawn carriages rolled through the historic streets of Philadelphia, carrying tourists past Independence Hall, the Liberty Bell, and some of the most important landmarks in American history. To many visitors, these carriage rides offered something unique: a chance to slow down in the middle of a modern city and experience a small piece of what they imagined the past might have felt like. The sound of iron shoes striking pavement, the sight of a draft horse patiently waiting beside a centuries-old building, and the gentle pace of a carriage winding through Old City became part of Philadelphia's identity. For generations of tourists, a carriage ride was simply another stop on the itinerary, no different than visiting a museum or taking a guided walking tour. But for others, those same carriage rides represented something very different. While tourists saw history, animal welfare advocates saw horses working in an environment that they believe was fundamentally unsuitable for them. They saw large animals navigating crowded intersections, standing on hard pavement for hours, and sharing streets with buses, motorcycles, construction equipment, and thousands of pedestrians. For years, they argued that no matter how carefully the industry was regulated, modern city streets were not a place where horses truly belonged. That disagreement simmered beneath the surface for decades, occasionally attracting public attention, but rarely generating enough momentum to produce significant change. Then, gradually, the conversation began to shift. Public attitude towards animal welfare evolved. Social media amplified concerns that might once have remained local issues. Activists became more organized. Politicians became more willing to engage within the topic. And eventually, after years of debate, protests, lobbying efforts, and public discussion, Philadelphia made a decision that would have seemed unthinkable to many people just a generation ago. In June of 2026, Philadelphia officially banned horse-drawn carriage operations. For supporters of the measure, it was a landmark victory for animal welfare and a sign that society was beginning to rethink how animals are used in public entertainment and tourism. For opponents, it represented the loss of a beloved tradition that had connected visitors to the city's history for nearly half a century. And for the horse world more broadly, the decision may be significant, not because of what happened in Philadelphia itself, but because of what it could signal about the future. Because if there is one thing that has become increasingly clear over the last decade, it is that public expectations regarding horse welfare are changing rapidly. Whether the topic is racing, dressage, carriage horses, rodeos, or recreational riding, the horse industry is facing questions that previous generations rarely had to answer. Increasingly, the public is asking not simply whether horses are cared for, but whether certain activities should continue at all. The Philadelphia carriage horse ban sits squarely within that larger conversation, and understanding why the city reached this decision requires us to look not only at carriage horses themselves, but the broader relationship between humans and horses in the 21st century. The story begins in 1976. Like many American cities, Philadelphia was looking for ways to celebrate its historical significance during the nation's bicentennial celebrations. As one of the birthplaces of the United States, the city expected large numbers of visitors who wanted to experience American history firsthand. Horse-drawn carriages seemed like a natural fit. They complemented the architecture, enhanced the atmosphere of Old City, and provided tourists with a memorable way to explore the city. What began as part of a celebration eventually became a permanent feature of the city's tourist industry. For decades, the arrangement appeared relatively stable. Carriage operators developed businesses around the rides. Tourists continued to book them. Many residents viewed the horses as a familiar part of the city's character. Yet, throughout those years, critics continued to raise concerns. Some worried about accidents involving traffic, Others focused on the physical demands placed upon horses working on hard urban surfaces. Still, others question whether horses, as prey animals with highly developed instincts for detecting danger, could ever truly be comfortable in such an environment. To understand those concerns, it helps to think about the world from a horse's perspective. Horses evolved in open grasslands where their survival depended upon their ability to detect potential threats and react quickly. Their sensory systems are remarkably sophisticated. Their hearing is acute. Their field of vision is extraordinarily wide. Their nervous systems are designed to identify sudden changes in their surroundings and prepare them for flight if necessary. These adaptations helped horses survive predators for millions of years. But they also meant that horses experience the world very differently than humans do. Imagine standing at a busy city intersection and attempting to process every sound, movement, vibration, and visual stimulus occurring around you simultaneously. The rumble of engines, the hiss of air brakes, the sudden blast of a horn, the flashing lights of emergency vehicles, the movement of crowds, the vibrations transmitted through concrete and pavement. Humans are remarkably good at filtering out much of that information. Horses, however, evolved to pay attention to it. That does not necessarily mean horses cannot adapt to urban environments. Many clearly do. Police horses work in cities, mounted patrol units operate in crowded public spaces. Carriage horses themselves often spend years navigating traffic without incident. The debate has never really been about whether horses can survive these environments. Rather, it is centered on whether they should be expected to work in it, and whether it is fair to them, and whether the risks and stress involved can ever be justified. Supporters of carriage operations have long argued that they can. They point out that many carriage horses receive excellent veterinary care. Veterinary examinations, regulated work schedules, mandatory rest periods, nutritional oversight, and regular inspections are common features of carriage horse programs in many cities. Operators frequently note that their horses are valuable animals whose health and well-being directly affect the success of their business. From this perspective, the public sometimes underestimates the level of care these horses receive. Removing horses from visible roles within the society may further distance people from animals that have already become increasingly unfamiliar to many urban residents. This concern is not entirely without merit. One of the challenges facing the horse industry today is relevance. Fewer people grow up around horses than in previous generations. Fewer people have first-hand experience with agriculture. Many members of the public encounter horses only through media coverage, sporting events, or occasional tourist attractions. As society becomes more urbanized, opportunities for direct interaction with horses becomes increasingly limited. For some supporters of carriage rides, this makes preserving visible connections between horses and the public more important, not less. Animal welfare advocates, however, view the situation differently. They argue that public visibility should never outweigh welfare considerations. From their perspective, the question is not whether carriage horses receive food, shelter, or veterinary care. The question is whether asking horses to work in dense urban environments is ethically appropriate in the first place. That distinction is important because it reflects a broader shift occurring across many areas of animal welfare. Increasingly, discussions are moving beyond questions of basic care and focusing instead on quality of life. An animal may be physically healthy while still experiencing conditions that critics believe are undesirable. The conversation becomes less about survival and more about well-being. This philosophical shift can be seen throughout the horse world. In dressage, debates increasingly focus on training methods and psychological welfare. In racing, discussions often center on injury risk and long-term outcomes for horses. In recreational riding, concerns about equipment, management practices, and turnout opportunities receive growing attention. Across disciplines, there is a movement towards evaluating not only whether horses are healthy, but whether their lives align with evolving welfare expectations. Philadelphia's decision reflects that changing mindset. The activists who pushed for the ban were not simply arguing that carriage horses lacked food or veterinary care. They were arguing that the environment itself was inappropriate. No amount of regulation, in their view, could eliminate the fundamental conflict between horse welfare and urban traffic. Whether one agrees with that conclusion or not, it is difficult to ignore the broader trend it represents. Society is increasingly willing to reconsider long-standing traditions when animal welfare concerns are involved. Practices that once escaped scrutiny now face intense public examination. And in many cases, social media accelerates these discussions dramatically. A single video, photograph, or news story can reach millions of people within hours. Public opinion can shift rapidly. Industries that depend on public support find themselves under pressure to respond. The horse industry has experienced this repeatedly over the past decade, and there is little reason to believe that trend will slow down in the future. In many ways, the Philadelphia carriage horse ban may be less about carriage horses themselves than about this larger cultural transformation. The decision reflects changing expectations regarding what society considers acceptable, what risks it's willing to tolerate, and how it believes animals should be integrated into modern life. And perhaps that is why this story matters so much beyond the city limits of Philadelphia. Because whether you support the ban or oppose it, the questions it raises are unlikely to disappear. They are questions that every equestrian discipline, every horse-related business, and every organization that relies upon public trust will increasingly be forced to confront. What responsibilities do humans have towards the horses that serve them? How should tradition be weighed against animal welfare concerns? And perhaps most importantly, how can the horse world maintain public confidence in an area where scrutiny has never been greater? Thank you so much for joining us. And remember, I am not AI. If you listen closely, you can hear me breathing.